Before we begin, I want to rant a bit. Why does Redmi always have different variants of the same phone? Why don't they just make one, maybe two variants and call it a day? Wouldn't that be easier? Anyway, I have with me the Note 14 Pro 5G global variant, so just remember that. The unboxing experience is identical to its predecessor. We get the phone, a rubber phone case, a charging adapter, a USB-A to USB-C cable, and a SIM ejector tool. I like the fact that the protective case is grey and not transparent because unlike the clear case, this wouldn't turn yellow after a couple of months. But then, even with that said, I don't think this is the type of phone to put a case on. Because, why would you want to cover this beauty? I have with me the lavender purple 14 Pro 5G. That and the coral green variants have this leather-like finish, while the black has just a simple plastic back. The purple and green variants definitely have the more interesting design. On mine we can see the cross pattern at the back with two shades of purple. We can see the purple ring around the camera module and the frame, which is also purple. I like how the sides are glossy but then the top and bottom are matte. Another thing I like is the curve on both the rear and front of this phone. It makes the phone really comfortable to hold. And although some people might not like its curved display, I do. I think because of that and all the other things I've talked about, this phone looks and feels very premium. Like if I told you this phone costs $500 or 800,000 naira, you'd be like, yeah, makes sense. Just like its predecessor, this has an under-display fingerprint sensor. It also has stereo speakers that sound really good and the very popular IR blaster. One thing that's different though, or should I say one thing that's gone, is the headphone jack. I feel like at this price point, it's not that big a deal, but yeah, there's no headphone jack on the 14 Pro 5G. We had Gorilla Glass Victus protection on the 13 Pro 5G, but it's now been upgraded to Victus 2 on the 14 Pro 5G. The phone's IP rating was also upgraded. We've gone from IP54 to IP68. So I would say, yeah, in terms of design and build quality, the 14 Pro 5G is definitely an upgrade from its predecessor. You can also consider its display an upgrade. First off, it's curved. Yes, some people might not like that, but for me, that makes it an upgrade. But it's not just that, this phone is also brighter. It has a peak brightness of 3000 nits, while its predecessor peaks at 1800 nits. Oh, and it also has HDR10 Plus support. The 13 Pro 5G did not have that. Everything else though, stayed the same. It's still AMOLED, its refresh rate is still 120Hz, and its resolution is still 1.2K. It's a good looking display, no doubt. I've watched movies on it. The deep blacks, the vibrance, sharpness, it's a good display. I don't know, what else can I say? By default, its refresh rate is set to auto adjust, but you can change that to custom and then select 120Hz. You can also go further and check out the apps using high refresh rate. Some apps are turned off by default, but you can go ahead and turn them on so that you get that full fluid experience in every app. Something that you wouldn't need to turn on this phone is all the AI features. Xiaomi's tagline for the Note 14 series is AI crafted. They've included a couple AI features to this phone, and here are some of my favorites. My number one most useful AI feature is easily circle to search. I feel like every single phone should have this feature pre-installed. It's so useful. Gemini is also one that has to be talked about. It's the default voice assistant on this phone, and yeah, that too is super useful. It's not always accurate, but when it works really well. Then of course we have all the AI photo editing features. There's the very popular object eraser. There's also image expansion. The sky replacement feature is also there, and there are a couple other ones. All of these AI features I think are cool, and you might not use them every single day, but it's nice to know that when you do need to use them, they're on your phone. The 14 Pro 5G is running on HyperOS version 1 on top of Android 14. It's set to get 3 years of major Android updates, which I think is fine for a $300 phone. Another thing that's fine for a $300 phone is this phone's processor. This is using the Dimensity 7300 Ultra chipset. Some people might not like the fact that Redmi went from a Snapdragon processor to a MediaTek processor, but when you compare last year's chipset to this, you see that it was a good choice. The 7300 or 7300 is a 4nm 5G processor. It's powerful enough to handle all of your basic phone needs, and it would do so efficiently. I have the variant with 8 gigs of RAM, but it does go up to 12. For a $300 phone, this phone performs quite well. It's not super quick and fluid, apps don't open in an instant or any of that, but it's still very fine. Like I said, this would be able to handle all of your regular phone tasks easily. And even though it's not instant, it's still relatively quick. Oh, and this can also game. You can play your favorite titles at least high frame rate and high graphics settings. And you can expect no lag and no overheating. I also think its stereo speakers and its responsive AMOLED display make the gaming experience on here very enjoyable. For $300, I think this phone performs really well. Now I want to talk about the cameras on this phone. Just like with its predecessor, we get a 200 megapixel main camera. We also get an 8 megapixel ultra-wide camera and a 2 megapixel macro camera. So no changes in that department. The main camera, I really like. I like how it handles colors. I like how detailed it is. I think it does really well with dynamic range. And even when you look at photos taken at night or in dark environments, they actually look good. The same can be said about the ultra-wide camera. It's just that because it's 8 megapixels, it's not as detailed as the main camera. But other than that, yeah, really good. The 14 Pro 5G has something called optical grade lossless zoom. That's just a fancy way of saying you can zoom in at 2x and 4x optically, and you wouldn't be losing too much detail. I think it's pretty good, it works well. Now let's talk about the camera at the front of the phone, the 20 megapixel selfie camera, which by the way, was upgraded from 16 megapixels. I don't like to take selfies, so I only took a few. Some indoors, some outdoors. And if I were to rate them, I'll probably give them a 7. They're not particularly great, they kind of look a bit washed, but I wouldn't say they're terrible. What do you guys think? And then for video, well, this is also what the front-facing camera looks like. Unlike the main camera, this shoots max at 1080p, but comes equipped with video stabilization, which in my opinion is much better than being able to shoot in 4K. I think the videos from the front-facing camera are fine. Color does seem to change a whole lot as you move the camera around, and it also does seem to struggle with dynamic range a little bit. But other than that, it's fine. The rear-facing camera, as I mentioned earlier, is able to shoot in 4K, which is nice. And it also gets video stabilization. I actually really like the video quality. Color is spot on, it handles dynamic range pretty well, and it's also detailed. Videos at night also look quite good. I'm really impressed with its video quality. Let me know what you guys think of its cameras though down in the comments. We get a slightly, and I mean slightly, bigger battery on the 14 Pro 5G. It's now 5110 mAh compared to 5100 mAh on the 13 Pro 5G. Even though this is more of an insignificant upgrade, the most important thing is that we still get a big battery. A big battery that would last the entire day for basically everyone. With this phone, you can expect 9 to 10 hours of screen on time with average use, which is like, again, the whole day. So no issues there. Where there's an issue though, is with charging. The 13 Pro 5G supported 67 watts of wired charging, but here on its successor, we get a downgrade. This only supports 45 watts of wired charging. Now, is 45 watts fast enough for most people? Yes. I mean, this phone goes from 0 to 100 in a little over an hour, so it's fast, but just not as fast. So I would say this is the only category we get a downgrade in. The Redmi Note 14 Pro 5G is a gorgeous, very capable, low-end mid-range smartphone. It's an upgrade from its predecessor in almost every category. There's not a lot to complain about. Just that selfie camera, the lack of a headphone jack, the slightly slower charging, and honestly, availability. Depending on where you live, you might not be able to buy this particular variant, or you might have to spend extra to buy this particular variant. Not very ideal. So I would say if you can find this in your region without having to spend extra, this is a very good $300 smartphone. And I think if you go ahead and buy it, you'd be very satisfied with it. It's a really good phone. Those are my thoughts on the Redmi Note 14 Pro 5G. Let me know what you guys think of this phone down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you when you see me.